there was a silence. I wasn't sure how to handle it. Wasn't sure what to do with it. Wasn't sure where to go with it. And Em and I, we just kind of broke down in tears this morning. And I'm like, man, I got to speak here. And this is like an hour ago. I mean, this is fresh. This is raw feelings. And then you go into that song, and Ember, and I'm like, oh, it's a nice song. And then Ember reaches over and she grabs my hand and she gives it a little squeeze. And I'm like, oh, I got to hold it together. But the more I thought about it, I don't have to hold it together. Guys, we don't have to hold it together. Sometimes we think we do. Sometimes we feel like we have to. And we touched on it 3 weeks ago about being real. As Naomi was real when she came back. And her friends were excited to see her, and she was just in a place of sorrow. And I've thought a lot about that. And I think it's important to be real. It's important, especially for me as a speaker, to get up here and be real with you. I mean, you see me, an hour a week, a month, and I'm going to say I'm on my best behavior. I've planned, I've prepared, I've studied, I've prayed, I've sought the Lord, I've written stuff down. You see me for this short clip. But the reality is we got life that we're working through. We got life we're walking through. We got life we're doing together. Like the words of that song, to want to be different. I was just confessing and just emptying my heart out to Ember this morning. About looking forward. I guess, and that takes us to today's message. I thought we were going to wrap up with Ruth today. I honestly did. I thought this was lap 4 on, as we look at the 1 mile race. But the 1 mile race isn't over yet. See, last time we were looking at kind of laps 2 and 3, taking us into lap 4. Lap 4 is like the glory lap. Everybody's excited when you see the final quarter. Maybe when the game is neck to neck, when you're running, or when you're playing, when you're competing. Unless it's a blowout, which sometimes it is if you're a Pirates fan, or maybe, a Cleveland fan. I don't know why you would be, but unless it's a blowout, you're coming in and you got the finish line. The goal line is in front of you. And you're laying it all out there, and the crowd is cheering, and you can see it. And honestly, I thought that's where it would be this week. But God has a little bit more to say about the 4-lap race. See, the finish line is the glory. When you cross it, when you've left everything on the field, when you've left everything on the track, when you've done all you can do and you come across, there's some glory there. And honestly, we like the glory, don't we? I mean, we have the celebration, we have the party, we stand up, we give each other a high five, we cheer, we see, if you're on the track, you're maybe falling down, you've left it all there. We like the glory. But there's a saying, you see my glory, but you don't know my story. And I think it's important when we look at the story. See, in a 4-lap race, or maybe in a 1-lap race, if you're a bit of a masochist and run the 400, or maybe you step out and do a 10K. a 5K, a 10K. Maybe you step out and do a half marathon. Maybe you step out and do a full marathon. Maybe you're into football, like Jonas has been learning the past few weeks. There's the glory of the competition, but there's the story of everything that goes in beforehand. We don't always see the story. You see, in a 4-lap race, in a mile race, even though it's like, from here to the high school. Is that about a mile? Or from the bridge to the high school? It's about a mile. There's a lot of miles that go in before that. As we train for a race, it takes 12 to 16 weeks to properly prepare for a race. We don't see that, except the person in the race. They see it. There's the commitment part of a race. There's the commitment that says, all right, I'm going to do this. But then there's walking it out. There's getting up. Maybe you're a morning person and putting in the miles. Maybe you're an evening person and doing your miles then. The thing is, whether you're morning or evening, there's no shortcut to doing the miles. As you train for a race, there's different style of training. There's what they call tempo running. There's fast training. There's slow training, where you go out and you do measured runs. There's strength training. There's training you do with other people. If you live around here, you train on hills. Maybe you use the rail to trail. There's training that you do according to a program. There's training where you wake up in the morning and your legs hurt. There's training that you do and you're like, oh, do I need to go see a doctor? And maybe you have to dial things down. There's the training you do that requires some ice. There's the training that you do requires some ibuprofen. There's overtraining and there's undertraining. There's a training that you're like, I really don't want to do this anymore. True. There's the lonely miles where you're by yourself. All of that builds. You're building your body, you're conditioning your legs, you're conditioning your lungs to run a race. See, that's all the work that gets put in. And it's the work that you put in beforehand that when you're in lap 4 and you're coming around and you can maybe hear the person beside you, you can hear the crowd cheering you on. It's the work that you have done in advance that has prepared you for this moment in life. It's those lonely hours of commitment when you're running the course and you see the finish line and everybody's cheering you on and you can say, I got this. Other people around you, they may be falling apart. You know, where they hit the wall, where they have gone too far, they have pushed too hard. Or maybe they haven't done enough training and they're behind you. But you've put in the time, you've put in the effort, you've done the work, and you know how your body can respond, and you see the finish line, and you can push. See, the story of Ruth, the story of Naomi, the story of the great grandmother of the greatest king in the Old Testament, King David. A man who's described as someone who is after God's own heart. We see that glory. But Ruth had a story before that. We know how she started. I want you to turn to Ruth chapter 2, and we're going to take a look at her story. This is right after Judges, right before 1 Samuel. Ruth chapter 2. Now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side from the clan of Elimelech, a man of standing whose name was Boaz. Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, "Let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor." Naomi said, "Go ahead, my daughter." So she went out and began to glean in the fields behind the harvesters. As it turned out, she found herself working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. Verse 2, "Let me go to the fields and pick the leftover grain." So Ruth, she leaves her home. She travels with Naomi to a foreign land. At this point, she's a widow. Her father-in-law has passed away. She has no children. In ancient times, there was not a social net to catch people. But the Lord in the law, if you look at Leviticus 19, the Lord said, when you are harvesting a field, do not harvest the edges of the field, and do not glean the field. This is for those who don't have. Basically, it was a safety net. It was a social net where people could go who had nothing, and they could get something. And we see the first part of Ruth's character here really starting to show. I mean, we saw it in chapter 1 where she says, "I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to stay with you." That's like a glimpse of the character. But now Ruth's character is really starting to show. "Let me go to the fields and pick up leftover grain." See, they maybe were starving at this point. They had a lot. They had, at this point, no one watching over them. Ruth steps out. She goes into the field. Now, the harvest has already happened. And this is just what I did a little bit of research. The next verse down says, she began to glean the fields behind the harvesters. What is it to glean? To glean. I mean, it's kind of a weird word, isn't it? Do we use it every day? Hey, I'm going to go do some gleaning. No, I mean, it's unfamiliar. But to glean is, in the one translation I saw, it was kind of like dumpster diving. You're going behind and you're getting what other people don't want. Wikipedia actually describes gleaning as to go and carefully search for what is not economical to be commercially harvested. So whatever could not be commercially done, there people would come behind those that didn't have anything, and they would look. But it was a way that it preserved character. It was a way that somebody who was diligent could find food. It preserved dignity. It wasn't just a handout. Under the law, you could not take it. But under the law, it left space for those that didn't have. And they could go with dignity and get sustenance. So the first part of Naomi's character is really showing she wasn't afraid to go after it. Even though she was a stranger in a strange land, a foreigner. Even though she had no covering. she was willing to step out. And I like this because how she did it. She asked for permission. She just didn't run out on her own. She had her mother-in-law, and she said, "Let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain." And her mother-in-law gave her a blessing. Verse 4, just then Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. "The Lord be with you. The Lord bless you," they called back. Boaz asked the foreman, "Hey, whose young woman is that?" I mean, Boaz was a man, he was of great wealth. He was familiar with his workers. He knew who would be in his fields, and he saw a stranger in his field. Now, it's kind of neat, and there's really a good principle here. What caught Boaz's eye? Was it the shapeliness of Ruth? Was it her great beauty? No. It was her character. It was her work ethic. And I think there's a lot to be said. I mean, this is really good counsel for young men. When you're looking for a spouse, don't get sucked into shapeliness, but look for character of heart, look for character of spirit. See, it was Ruth's character that was beginning to make a way for her. It was Ruth's work ethic. I mean, at this point, she is just out in a field picking up grain, doing hard work. But Boaz comes, he's like, "Who is that?" He saw that there was something different about her. The foreman replied, "She is a Moabitess who came back from Moab with Naomi. She said, 'Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters.' She went into the field and has worked steadily from morning to now." See, even though that she had a right to be there according to the law, according to Leviticus, according to what the Lord said, Ruth was really showing her character. One, she asked her mother-in-law for covering. Two, she went and she talked to the person who was in charge of the field. She didn't make a demand. She didn't make a request. She asked. She's really showing her character here. I don't know, it doesn't say what time of the day Boaz came along, if it was at lunchtime or if it was towards the evening. But the supervisor of the field had been mindful of her and was watching her, and he said, "She's been working all day. She's only taken a short rest in the shelter." It goes down through, and there's this interaction that starts to happen between Boaz and Ruth. "Don't go and glean in another field. Don't go away from here. Stay here with my servant girls. Watch the field where the men are harvesting. Follow along after the girls. I have told the men not to touch you. Wherever you're thirsty, go get a drink." So there's the interaction that starts to happen. But there's more work that needs to happen. It doesn't stop just there. See, when you go out and you get the grain, when you go out and you glean the fields, when you're bending over all day picking up, maybe your back hurts, maybe your knees hurt, maybe the sun's beating down on you. That's only the first part. See, you get down to verse 17. It said, Ruth gleaned in the field until evening. Then she threshed the barley she had gathered. So all day she's bending over, all day she's picking up, all day she's looking between for what she can take, what she can get. She's at the end of the row. Everybody else has gone through. The other servant girls have gone through and already picked the field. So Ruth, in her humility, but in her character, is looking for that last little penny. And she doesn't let anything go to waste. At the end of the day, she comes back. But the barley in itself, what good is that? It takes another step to process. It said she threshed the barley she had gathered, and it mounted to about an ephah, which they say is 3/5 of a bushel, or 22 liters. A fair amount of grain. See, but to thresh something, you have to pick it up and throw it in the air and let the wind kind of blow away the chaff. So you have just product at the end of the day that you can use, that can then be ground up and used to make bread. So Ruth, in her story, was willing to go out with the blessing of her mother and go through a field that has been commercially harvested, and then the servant girls have come behind. Now we do know that Boaz, seeing the character of Ruth, had his young men leave some for her. So Boaz was starting to work on behalf of Ruth because of her character, because of what she was willing to do. She comes back. Verse 19. Hey, where'd you glean today? Where did you work? Bless the man who took notice of you. The name of the man I worked with today is Boaz. The Lord bless him. He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead. This man is our close relative. He is one of our kinsmen redeemers. See, now Ruth she doesn't know it entirely, but she is on lap 4. And we're not actually going to get to the finish line till next week, because I'm going to be back here next week. But I want to give you a couple principles to think about, to kind of mull over. In science, there's a principle that something that is in motion will stay at motion. Something that's at rest will, I'm looking to my dad, stay at rest unless acted on by an outside force. It's Newton's first law. There's another principle that talks about when something's at motion, it's easier to direct its path. And when something is at rest, it takes a lot of force to get it into motion. See, in our lives, when we're running the race, and like Ruth and Naomi, they've had tragedy happen. But Ruth, she stayed in motion. She got back to Naomi's hometown. She's like, I got to keep moving. And she stepped out into the field. That was her staying in motion. See, we look down here. That man is our close relative. He is one of our kinsmen redeemers. The Lord was at work in Ruth's life. It's a lot easier for God to work in our lives when we're in motion. It's a lot easier for Him to direct our path when we're taking that next step. Ruth was doing the hard work. We'll see her glory next, but she was willing to do the work. She didn't know it at the time, but God was directing her steps, directing her path. She didn't know who Boaz was. She just went into the field to start. She knew she had to survive. She was taking that next step. Guys, I want to encourage you this week. I want to encourage you next week. Keep taking that next step. It's really easy to stop. It is. But once you stop, it is really challenging to get moving again. Please keep taking that next step. I don't know what that'll look like to you. I mean, for Ruth, it was her willingness to go out and help provide for Naomi, help provide sustenance for her to keep living. That next step may be praying for people. I mean, you may not have the physical mobility anymore, but you have the spiritual wherewithal, the spiritual strength, the spiritual character to lift people up on a regular basis in prayer. I've really been thinking about, and I've been calling it praying with purpose. And I'll just throw this out to you guys. This week, school starts for Red Bank Valley. We have a whole mess of kids that are going to be coming back into the school. And it's been 3 years since they've had a normal school year. We have the teachers that are preparing. We have the staff that's getting the grounds ready. We have coaches that are trying to get kids to work together. We have an administration that's working to make it all happen. Guys, I want to encourage you, if you're looking for a next step to take, pray with purpose for our school. Pray with purpose for Red Bank Valley. Pray with purpose for our teachers and our kids and our educational system. Guys, our kids that go through here are our tomorrows. They are very important. They're very vital. Guys, it's a lot of work preparing for our tomorrows. Pray for our teachers that they would have the wisdom and the grace and the strength and the humor, that they would have the ability as they go through the next, 9 months. Guys, pray for our parents. They could be like Ember and I, and maybe dealing with a quiet house for first time. It's very real. I talked to a mom yesterday. She's putting her child on the bus for the first time. I remember what that feels like. I remember what it was like when Clara hopped on the bus and off she went. But there's a lot of things that we can do, like Ruth went out into the field and worked, that we can do for our community. We can pray. We can listen. Maybe that you have a friend who calls you up with a week and said, I need to talk. To take time to listen, to take time to be there. See, that's a very real part of us running our miles, of us doing our loop. You see the glory of them going on the steps, but there's a big story that goes on behind it. So, with that, I want to wrap up and bless you. And I promise, next week we will get to lot 4. It's there. But next week there's another person in the picture that we really need to talk about. And he is a picture of Jesus Christ in the Old Testament. His name's Boaz, the kinsman redeemer, and who Jesus is to us and what he does for us. So you bow your heads. Lord, I just give thanks for today. Lord, I give thanks for Ruth and how her character made a way for her. Lord, I just pray for all my brothers and sisters in Christ. Lord, that you would direct them in the paths that they are to go. Lord, that you would encourage them to keep taking that next step. Lord, where maybe we've become discouraged and we've sat still a little too long, Lord, that we would just give them that enough of a nudge to keep moving again, to say, you can do it. Keep going forward. Lord, I give thanks for our school system. Lord, I pray for the kids. Lord, I pray for the teachers. I pray for the staff and administration. Lord, I pray for this upcoming year, and I ask that your hand would be on the Red Bank Valley. Lord, I pray that there would just be a grace and a mercy in our schools. Lord, I just pray that the kids would be able to learn free from any issue. Pray a blessing on them and their homes. Lord, that your peace would rest with them. In Jesus' name, amen. It's good to be with you guys. Thank you.